Scotland is a mythical realm of rock, water and wood. From storm-tossed sea stags to idyllic beaches, exhilarating ridge walks to intimate wildlife encounters, this country is a never-ending adventure. 7 weeks, 6,000 kilometers and more rainbows than we could count. This is the Grand Scottish Roadtrip. Our journey began at the Mull of Galloway, the southernmost point of the country. Since 1830, a lighthouse has guided ships through the turbulent waters of the coast. With 790 officially recognized islands, Scotland has always been deeply maritime. As a result, ferries are an essential part of any road trip. Our first crossing took us to the Isle of Arran. This island is often described as Scotland in miniature, combining mountains, forests and a dramatic shoreline. People have lived here for millennia, as evidenced by the multiple archaeological sites. The highlight of a visit to Arran is a hike through its rugged interior.
What a fantastic way to start this road trip through Scotland. The sun is shining, the wind is howling, I'm surrounded by a beautiful glen, and I'm walking straight into a rain front. I don't think it gets any more Scottish than this.
In fact, the brooding clouds only accentuated the pristine surroundings. Soon after, the stiff breeze morphed into a boisterous gale. But the reward for braving wind, water and wilderness was a phenomenal view. To return to the mainland, we took a different ferry to the west. This allowed us to explore the entire length of a little visited peninsula. Along the way, we stopped at several beaches, spotted seals barely hauled out of the water, and even caught a glimpse of Northern Ireland. Over the following days, the weather took a turn for the worse. Trying to escape the rain, we traded the serene seaside for the wilderness of the Highlands. At first, that strategy worked surprisingly well. But as soon as we set out on a hike, the forest echoed with the sound of falling water. Before long, the mountaintops were swallowed by a dark wall of clouds. Curiously, this is exactly the kind of weather that feels most authentic. Scotland shrouded in mist is raw, haunting and deeply mysterious. And with every downpour, its waterfalls gain in splendour. That said, we certainly celebrated the sun's return. There is a special kind of magic to a landscape reborn, when the veil of secrecy is lifted by the forces of wind and sun. A wonderful place to witness this transformation is the Park of Glencoe. Late in the evening, when the light softens and the shadows lengthen, this conical mountain reveals some of Scotland's finest scenery.
Good morning. It is just past 7 a.m. and I've set out on the most exhilarating ridge walk in all of Scotland, or so people say. Now, conditions today are absolutely perfect. We had clear skies, sunshine, a little bit of wind, and absolutely no other people. Now, this is most definitely a perilous trail, so I will have to take things slowly, but for the moment I'll simply soak in the early morning sun and enjoy the fabulous mountain vistas. So much to sunshine and clear skies. This one cloud here is very persistent. It sits right on the ridgeline and I can't really see anything left, right, front or back. I hope the wind and or the sun will increase a bit in strength and push away the cloud so that I do actually get to enjoy the scenery as well.
For the time being, I trudged on, following a trail that became increasingly difficult. Eventually, my prayers were answered, and the Aonach Eagach ridge emerged from the clouds. The Highland skies could not have timed it any better, as the next section of the hike was by far the most demanding. The aptly named crazy pinnacles require a head for heights and plenty of self-confidence. Finding secure handholds was not always easy, particularly with all the camera gear. Needless to say, this traverse must not be underestimated. Long, exposed and rated between a grade 2 and 3 scramble, it sits just below rock climbing. But in the right conditions and with ample preparation, it may well be the most thrilling trail in the UK.
In Scotland, every mountain higher than 914.4 meters is called a Munro. Now, this seems to be quite the arbitrary number, but converted into the imperial system, which the British are still surprisingly fond of, it equates to 3,000 feet. In all of Scotland there are 282 mountains that qualify as a Munro, and throughout the last century or so a sort of national sport has emerged which is called Munro bagging, and that means that Scots will try to climb as many Munros as possible throughout their lifetime. Once you have completed all 282, you can call yourself a Munroist. I of course won't get anywhere close to that number, but needless to say, on this road trip I shall try to climb as many Munros as possible.
And a great place to begin this quest is the vicinity of Glencoe. With 14 Munros to choose from, there are numerous opportunities for alpine escapades. Of course, chasing peaks for the sake of an arbitrary number may seem a little ridiculous. But if that number leads you into Scotland's outdoors, where no 2 days are ever quite the same, it is as good an excuse as any. Other than on foot, the area can also be explored by car. A particular favourite, especially among film fans, is the road through Glen Etive. Several international blockbusters, including Braveheart, the James Bond movie Skyfall, and Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, use the valley as a backdrop. Leaving Glencoe behind, we headed south. Sometime later, we set up camp next to a quiet stretch of river. The next morning, the weather was decidedly moody. All the peaks above Loch Lomond were completely hidden from view.
Sometimes I seriously question the psychology of people, like myself, who, despite knowing full well that they wouldn't see a thing on top of a mountain, still decide to climb it in these conditions. I mean, already at the car park I knew it'd be cold and wet and generally miserable, and still I set out. I could be in a spa right now, sitting in a hot tub, or sit in a cafe and slurp a hot beverage, but no, I had the urge to climb Ben Lomond, and so I did. It's quite fascinating.
Luckily, things started to look up soon after. This was in no small part due to one of our favorite experiences of the trip. Seeing a group of farmers tending to their sheep, we stopped and watched in fascination. It did not take long before Anna found herself holding a lamb, which, needless to say, triggered a rush of endorphins. Initially, we thought that it was time for the animal's yearly shearing. This was not the reason for this sheepish commotion, though. Instead, the lambs were temporarily separated from their mothers, and then gently placed on a contraption called a lamb chute.
Still no excuse by the deer, man.
I don't think so. Duncan got into it.
There they received a number of treatments, the first of which was ear tagging. This allows farmers to always identify their animals, even if they escape from the paddock. Next up, the lambs received a warming treatment and were vaccinated against bacterial infections. Another procedure is castration. Male lambs that are not intended for breeding are castrated with rubber rings. Being cut off from blood flow, the testicles wither and eventually drop off. A similar approach is used for tail docking. The reason for this procedure is to prevent fly strike, a potentially fatal maggot infestation caused by flies laying eggs in soiled wool. To prevent that from happening, lambs are also sprayed with an insecticide. While the young ones received their treatments, the ewes were given a warm drench. Once the last batch of ewes and lambs had been taken care of, it was Anna's big moment.
You get a job with the department now.
And the same spot. Same spot on the other side.
Good stuff.
And then just let it go. How are you going?
Just like a flick of the wrist.
To the mark thing.
No,
Oh my god! Oh, baby.
And then the lambs were released, which was met with great enthusiasm.
No, I know. Thank you. What the lambs are going to
There is no doubt that this hour and a half of lamb cuddling and learning about sheep farming will stay with us forever.
All the way up here.
500 or 600 pounds.
Whereas some parts of the Scottish Highlands are overrun by tourists, others remain virtually unknown. A prime example of the latter is Creag Meagaidh. This mountain and its surrounding valleys capture the very essence of Scotland's untamed spirit. Our favorite moment was sitting on the shore of a lake, encircled by an amphitheater of towering peaks. Much more popular, but no less impressive, is the hike to Steall Falls. Plunging 120 meters, this is the second highest waterfall in Scotland. Not far from the foot of the falls, a rope bridge allows daring hikers to reach the opposite riverbank. From there, a theoretically scenic hike leads steeply uphill. The Ring of Steall is one of Scotland's premier hiking routes, combining the ascent of 4 Munros with far-reaching views of waterfalls, glacial valleys and soaring peaks. The trail is undeniably demanding as it is both long and fully exposed to the elements. Even in summer, temperatures can plummet to below freezing. Amplified by the piercing wind, these conditions demand both physical endurance and mental resilience. As is widely known, the Scottish weather is an unfathomable mystery. One day, a ferocious gale whips wisps of cloud across the mountaintops. The next, clear skies pretend that nothing ever happened.
Good morning. I am currently climbing to the highest peak of Scotland, which incidentally is also the highest peak of the United Kingdom. And this trail is fairly easy, to be honest, slowly winding its way up the mountain. But as a result, it is also extremely popular. I think I must have passed more than 100 people already, even though I started around 7 a.m. So yeah, quite busy up here. But now it's maybe another 2 kilometers or so, and then I shall enjoy the view from the top.
Around 150,000 people climb Ben Nevis each year, making it by far the most popular ascent in Scotland. On a sunny summer's day, a seemingly endless procession of hikers snakes its way to the top. Fortunately, the panorama, even if rarely enjoyed in peace, is well worth the effort. The next part of our road trip led us away from the crowds. Following narrow roads, we visited several little-known sites. One of our favorites was Ariundle Oakwood. This forest is a surviving fragment of the ancient Atlantic oak woodlands that once stretched from Norway to Portugal. Its all-encompassing tranquility makes it the perfect place to unwind. The Isle of Mull is another jewel in Scotland's treasure chest of natural wonders. Combining 480 kilometers of coastline with mountains, lakes, rivers and forests, the island delights with a variety of environments. Most of its roads are single track, but if anything, that only adds to the adventure. Beyond its wild interior, Mull also enchants with its pearly white beaches. Were it not for the slightly cooler climate, the soft sand and turquoise water could easily rival those of the Caribbean. Is the tastefully restored Tioram Castle. Overlooking the Sound of Mull, this fortress dates back to the 13th century. After lying in ruins for more than 200 years, the castle was brought back to life in 1911. Setting up camp beneath the island's highest peaks, we watched the threatening approach of a storm front. To return to the mainland, we boarded yet another ferry. Close to land, the sea was reasonably calm. However, the farther we headed out, the more the vessel was thrown around. Ashore, grey skies and constant rain were a fitting welcome committee. During one of the few moments it wasn't pouring down, we visited Castle Tioram. This ruined stronghold stands on an island that can only be reached at low tide. Due to its strategic location at the mouth of a river, the fortress controlled access to Loch Shiel. But like many others of its kind, it eventually succumbed to the gnawing bite of fire. Not far to the north, the Isle of Skye is Scotland's most visited island. Its popularity stems from a combination of easy accessibility, diverse terrain and a variety of hiking trails. Despite the downright atrocious conditions, I decided to climb Bidean. This was without doubt the most miserable I have ever been on a hike.
Behold the splendor of the Isle of Skye.
Driving around the island, the rain rarely let up. Even when it did, the heavy clouds lingered, cloaking the countryside in an eerie calm. Incidentally, this kind of weather is perfect for exploring the Cairn. Described as a nightmare of nature by the Scottish poet Alexander Smith, this otherworldly scenery was sculpted by a series of landslides. With its jagged pinnacles, soaring plateaus and hidden labyrinths of rock, it is one of Skye's most interesting geological formations. The only place in Skye that rivals the mythical charm of the Cairn is the old Man of Storr. This gigantic rock spire watches over the land like a silent guardian. If you can somehow look past the thousands of tourists who visit each day, its true magic slowly unfolds. For many visitors to Scotland, the Isle of Skye marks the westernmost point of their journey. However, looking out to sea, another landmass rises from the grey waters of the Atlantic. The Outer Hebrides are the longest archipelago in the British Isles. The more than 100 islands and skerries stretch for roughly 200 kilometers, forming a natural rampart off the Scottish west coast. Time and again, these islands bear the brunt of the wrathful ocean's wind and waves. Yet, to our surprise, neither storm nor downpour greeted us upon landfall. Instead, brilliant sunshine illustrated why the Outer Hebrides have become a place of longing for so many. This archipelago is best known for its vast beaches. But its windswept moorlands, lonely hills and flower-filled meadows are every bit as captivating. Along the way, we not only admired the surroundings, but also spotted a herd of native ponies. Their extraordinary hairstyles immediately reminded us of an 80s rock band. Another delightful animal encounter was with a group of grey seals. Getting from one island to the next was quite an undertaking, but today a series of causeways has made island hopping remarkably easy. Two islands not yet connected that way are Bernarey and Harris. Waiting for the ferry crossing was hardly a chore though, as the seascape provided ample distraction. Once on the other side, we slowly made our way north. But far from taking the direct route, we explored as many side trails as possible. Even though the weather was less welcoming than before, the coastal vistas remained spectacular. This was especially true of Kintyre Bay. With kilometers of white sand and crystal clear water set against the backdrop of distant peaks, its enduring appeal is obvious. An equally fascinating place is the Mangersta Sea Stacks. This array of colossal stone towers defies the crashing waves of the Atlantic, at least for the time being. Scottish stones have likewise stood the test of time. This prehistoric stone circle dates back to the Neolithic period, just shy of 5,000 years ago. Little is known about the people who erected these stones, but they were likely among Britain's earliest farming communities. An hour or so later, we arrived at the Butt of Lewis, the northernmost point of the Outer Hebrides. This place feels raw and remote, perpetually battered by wind and waves, with only a lighthouse standing sentinel in times of darkness. Back on the mainland, we set out on Scotland's most famous road trip. The NC 500 is an 830-kilometre long route that combines quintessential Highland country with a varied shoreline. Hiking trails lead through mountain valleys dotted with hundreds of lakes. The views are hard won though, as the Scottish weather gods have a mischievous sense of humour.
Scotland is definitely setting a record here, because never before on any of our trips have I been so wet and so miserable on so many hikes.
To make up for all that suffering, nature surprised us with a jaw-dropping rainbow. Despite its popularity, many parts of the NC 500 remain single-track roads. In summer, that can cause some serious heart palpitations. However, as we were traveling early in the season, it was not much of an issue. In fact, most hikes we went on, we only met a handful of people. One of our favorite trails followed the edge of a peninsula until we arrived at a 60-meter high sea stack. That day was truly one for the books. Under the golden sun, the verdant hills glowed with life, and the aquamarine shallows shimmered like a million diamonds. It was hard to imagine how it could get any better, but then it did. Due to its remoteness, Sandwood Bay remains one of the most unspoiled beaches in the UK. The nearest road is 6 kilometers away, so everyone coming here has to do so on foot. Framed by cliffs to the north and south, this beach is a 1-mile-long stretch of untouched natural beauty. Sitting high above the sand dunes, surrounded by swaying grass and crashing waves, time seemed to slow to the rhythm of the sea. With euphoria coursing through our bodies, we continued our exploration of the north. Along the way, we encountered a ruined castle, a cave with a waterfall, and, of course, numerous beaches. Another literal high point was reaching Chual Aluinn. Plunging 200 meters, Britain's highest waterfall lies hidden in a remote glen. Reaching it on foot requires a 5-kilometer march across boggy, trackless terrain. But as always, the tougher the trail, the fewer the people, meaning there is a good chance you'll have this place all to yourself. Following the coastline for several days, we decided to swing inland. The road turned out to be both narrow and bumpy, but the views more than made up for that. Heading that way also gave me the excuse to climb Ben Hope, the northernmost Munro in Scotland. Luckily, the clouds sat just above the summit, revealing a sweeping panorama of lochs, peaks and distant shores. Even though we had temporarily driven south, our northbound journey was not yet over. From Dunnet Head, we saw our next destination loom on the horizon. Orkney is an archipelago of 70 islands, 20 of which are inhabited. Despite its apparent isolation, this land has been populated for around 10,000 years. On mainland, as the largest island is rather confusingly called, the countryside is mostly shaped by agriculture. However, both the east and the west coast enchant with their seaside scenery. Vast beaches invite leisurely strolls, while wind-lashed cliffs provide a haven for seabirds. Particularly fascinating is the number of sea stags. Their abundance is the result of the Atlantic's relentless assault. As powerful waves crash against the cliffs, they gradually carve arches, cut off sea stags and ultimately bring about their collapse. By far the most famous rock tower is the Old Man of Hoy. Standing 137 meters tall, it is among the highest sea stags in the United Kingdom. Remarkably, the Old Man of Hoy is less than 250 years old. Neither medieval sagas nor historical maps mention this iconic formation. It first appeared in a sketch at the beginning of the 19th century. At the time, it still stood on two legs, one of which was washed away during a storm. This also offers a glimpse into the future, for the old man of Hoy will eventually succumb to the incessant onslaught of the Atlantic. But with miles of cliffs to sculpt, erosion will undoubtedly carve a new sea stack somewhere else. In stark contrast to the wave-battered west, the shallow bays of Hoy's east are the epitome of tranquility. On a sunny day, the waters glow in dazzling shades of turquoise. Farther inland, Highland cows pay little attention to such splendor, being far more interested in fresh grass. Following 3 days in Orkney, our journey continued across the sea. Taking an overnight ferry, we travelled to Scotland's northernmost archipelago. Shetland is a group of around 100 isles and skerries. Apart from the thrill of visiting somewhere truly remote, the islands are renowned for their cliffs and seabirds. A great place to start a visit is at Sambara Head, the main island's southernmost extremity. The surrounding coast is teeming with wildlife, including thousands of guillemots. These seabirds nest in densely packed colonies on steep rock faces. Rather than building nests, they simply incubate their single egg on the bare rock. Keeping the egg secure in such a precarious environment is quite the achievement. Atlantic puffins, by comparison, prefer a little more comfort. Their nests are usually hidden in deep burrows. Puffins spend the winter at sea but return to land each April. Once reunited with their partner, they begin lining their burrows with grass, leaves and feathers. Several thousand puffins nest on the grassy slopes of this headland. Thanks to its easy accessibility, it is one of the best places in Scotland to observe this endearing species. While the cliffs belong firmly to the seabirds, the beaches are ruled by grey seals. Despite their name, these hook-nosed sea pigs come in a variety of colours. In general, Shetland boasts excellent infrastructure, with most islands easily accessible by car or ferry. However, the Isle of Foula is so isolated that the most convenient way to get there is by air. Trading our car for a lunchbox with wings, we set out towards this far-flung outpost of civilization. Foula has no shortage of reasons to visit. For starters, the local ponies provide travelers with a warm welcome. Beyond that, the island is home to several striking arches. Additionally, more than anywhere else we visited, Foula invites reflection on what life is like on such a secluded island. But its greatest appeal is its seascape. Rising up to 390 meters above the Atlantic, the towering cliffs along Foula's west coast rank among the highest in Britain. And if that weren't enough already, the air is alive with thousands of birds. Derived from the Old Norse Fuglae, the name Foula translates to Bird Island. According to estimates, more than 100,000 guillemots, puffins, fulmars and kittiwakes nest on the cliffs. Their cries form the chaotic soundtrack of this island at the edge of the world. Tempted by the promise of an even better view, I decided to climb a little higher. From the top, Anna was nothing more than a red speck on a vast green cliff. I also realized that all this time we had been sitting on a massive sea arch. Gazing in the other direction, I saw Foula's highest cliffs awash with even more birds. And then, as the final touch to an unforgettable day, a schooner appeared beyond the headland, completing the illusion that we had somehow traveled back in time. Visiting Foula definitely requires some planning. Other islands are easier to reach. To get to Nos, for example, one only needs to hop on a dinghy. The island's greatest appeal is, unsurprisingly, its bird life. More than 200 species have been recorded here. Most people, of course, come for nature's cutest diver. Roughly 4,000 puffins nest on the grass-covered cliffs. On Nos, even more than elsewhere, they seem entirely unfazed by humans. Sitting less than a meter away, we happily eavesdropped on their animated chatter. Aside from puffins, the uncontested stars of Nos are its northern gannets. Almost 30,000 of these yellow-headed seabirds nest on the precipitous cliffs. At times, their raucous calls almost drown out the sound of the crashing waves. Every year, gannets return to their nesting sites in March or April. If there is enough space, they will choose exposed rock ledges. Once things get too crowded, however, they make do with islands and other flat surfaces. The reason they avoid these in the first place is that they struggle to take off from level ground. Nest building is usually the male's responsibility. To do so, they collect seaweed, plants, and increasingly discarded fishing nets. Unlike other bird populations which have been ravaged by avian flu, gannet numbers have been steadily increasing. If that trend continues, the cliffs of Nos will become even more packed, and the air above will turn into a whirlwind of white and yellow. The crowning moment of our time on Shetland awaited us on the Isle of Unst. All day long, the weather had been gloomy, with low-hanging clouds obscuring much of the landscape. Hiking through a thick soup of fog did not lift our spirits either. When we arrived at Hermanus, there was nothing to see but grey. Refusing to give up, we patiently waited in the mist. And our hopes were not in vain.
If you have any fascination with wildlife, particularly birds, the Shetland Islands are a dream destination. In the last 4 days we have walked to several towering sea cliffs, and again we have been blown away, not only by the views, but also by the amount of seabirds. We have seen hundreds of thousands of gannets, fulmars, guillemots, and of course everybody's favorite, sweet little puffins. Today it has been quite cloudy, but it is just starting to open up, and once again the views could not be any more impressive.
Of all the cliffs we visited, this one left the deepest impression. It is rare for us to be truly speechless, but witnessing a gannetry of such proportions, we could hardly believe our eyes. High above the colony, we simply stood in awe, trying to take in the sights, sounds, and even the smell of 60,000 seabirds. Following our time on Shetland, we spent the last part of our road trip on the mainland. First things first, we headed west to complete the southern stretch of the NC 500. Welcomed by fabulous evening light, we set up camp beside a lonely road. Taking things slowly, we always chose the smallest roads and stopped at just about every beach. Of course, we also explored the Torridon Hills. These mountains are some of the most dramatic in all of Scotland. Their rocks are among the oldest in the world, and glaciers have carved hundreds of lochs into the valleys. Scaling these peaks is immensely rewarding for anyone with a passion for lofty adventures. That said, some of the best perspectives are found further below. Playing a game of tag, sunshine and clouds chased each other across the hills. On our way south, that pattern kept repeating itself. Beyond its reputation as a panoramic route, Applecross Pass is also a great place to spot red deer. These large ungulates are common throughout the Highlands and can often be seen grazing by the roadside. In the evening, we got even more excited when a Eurasian otter surfaced not far from our camp.
With our trip through Scotland slowly coming to an end, I decided it's time to bag some more Munros. And there's no better place to do that than the Glen Shiel Ridge, because here you can climb not one, not two, not three, but 7 summits in a single day. Of course, this comes at the cost of having to walk around 28 kilometers and scaling almost 2,000 meters of elevation gain, so quite a strenuous hike. And usually I'd prefer to do that in clear conditions, but as it is Scotland, it is rather cloudy today again. But hey, at least it's not raining, and that is definitely something I'm grateful for.
In spite of its length, the hike was fairly manageable and offered plenty of moments to appreciate the surroundings.
So this evening has turned out entirely different than we thought it would, because we were driving on a small road heading into the wilderness essentially. And at one point we were boxed in by an ATV and we thought, what's happening now? And as it turns out, this is the local estate owner who really liked our car, and who could blame him for that? But what happened next really blew our minds, because A, he's extremely friendly. He immediately invited us to his house, introduced us to his family and friends, and now he's taking us to his favorite place on his estate where we can spend the night. Let's find out how beautiful that place is.
Following a gravel trail through the forest, our anticipation grew with every meter. When we arrived at the placid waters of a hidden lake, we realized the promises had not been exaggerated. Before us lay the secluded Glen Loyne, illuminated by the warm glow of the dying sun. Setting up camp just above the water, we could not have asked for a more peaceful setting. Far removed from civilization, the only sound breaking the silence was the soft lapping of the waves. The next morning we awoke to birdsong and a mirror-like lake. The final leg of our road trip brought us to Cairn National Park. This vast reserve is renowned for its scenic hikes, quiet mountain lakes, and weather so fickle that you can experience several seasons in a day. The highlight, however, was its tranquil woodlands. Surrounded by ancient pines and carpets of golden chanterelles, we savored one last moment of serenity. After 7 weeks on the road, having driven 6,000 kilometers and completed 21 ferry crossings, it was time to say goodbye. Scotland is wild, moody, and astonishingly beautiful. A land at the mercy of shifting skies, constantly reshaped by wind, water, and waves. From the storm-battered cliffs of the far north to the quiet glens of the interior, the untamed spirit of the land is the boon and bane of every traveller. Again and again, Scotland challenged us with its tempestuous weather, only to reward us tenfold with moments of breathtaking clarity. And in the end, all these experiences, both glorious and crueling, wove themselves into the lasting memory of this Grand Scottish road trip.